Viewers, dear ladies and gentlemen, we are very happy to welcome Dr. Sunil Raina as our guest today. Dr. Raina, could you please tell us more about the research that you perform in your laboratory and about its goal and the mission?
Well, thanks for having me on this YouTube interview. And to be very honest with you, I'm not a lab scientist. I don't work in labs. I am an epidemiologist by training, and I generally dabble in epidemiology and public health. And most of my work is primarily focused on epidemiology of communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases. Recently, I've shifted to communicable diseases, but most of my earlier work has been focusing on non-communicable diseases. I have also started working on certain other aspects of epidemiology, like, for example, how exactly high altitude medicine works out, or how exactly it pans out, how exactly do people who work in the high altitude or go to the high altitude, how exactly their biomarkers work, or how exactly are they able to cope up with the stresses of the extreme environments. That's something that I have started very recently, but then up till now, I have mostly focused on non-communicable diseases. And infections or communicable diseases came up because of COVID, and because of being an epidemiologist working in the field, I had to take it up. And some of my recent works have been on COVID-19 as well. Uh, by default, I tend to head a lab as well. It is a multidisciplinary research unit, which is a part of a scheme run by the Government of India, the Department of Health Research. It runs it as a scheme in my college, and I happen to be heading that multidisciplinary research unit also. And the focus of that multidisciplinary research unit at this point in time is metabolomics. Although as I said, I'm not a lab scientist, but there are scientists who work there, and I generally do the supervision part of it. The focus of that lab is non-communicable diseases, primarily focused on non-communicable diseases. And currently, we are working on the metabolomics of the non-communicable diseases. And we may, over a period of time, venture into proteomics and the genomics part of it. But the essential or the pillar focus for my lab, that's a multidisciplinary research unit, will continue to be non-communicable diseases.
Sure. What is the goal of your research? What is the mission? How would you describe it in a couple of sentences?
I would say my research is essentially focused on trying to identify the answers to the non-communicable diseases that have started to become more rampant than maybe they were 50 years back. So that is primarily my goal: finding a window of opportunity to find answers to preventing non-communicable diseases.
Sure. Non-communicable diseases, it is a pretty broad topic. Talking more about the projects that you were working on or currently have, what are your main lines of the research?
There are a few areas wherein I have worked for last 10 years. Right from dementia was one of the areas wherein I worked, and I have published quite a lot on dementia. Hypertension is another area wherein I have worked, and diabetes. These are three primary focus areas of mine as far as research is concerned: diabetes, hypertension, and dementia. And I have tried to find out the presence or the prevalence or the proportion of these diseases in populations which don't have this in plenty. So populations which have shown lower prevalence of diabetes, hypertension, or dementia, and tried to correlate what could be the reasons that it is not there in extreme measures as compared to maybe other populations of the country. So that is why I said that I'm looking for a window of opportunity which will tell me what will be useful in preventing these diseases in future.
Sure, sure. Coming from the perspective of the future impact of the epidemiology and the research performed on the future outcomes of people, what do you think here is the most challenging, and where do you think the most progress had been already made?
I think the most challenging part of research across the world will be doing correct science. That is probably the most difficult part. What I believe is in last 30 years or so, we have stopped doing the correct science. What we are doing very great deal of academics, but we are not doing the correct science. We are not starting our observations, or we are not starting our premise of research or premise of academics from questioning part of it. We have a set idea in our mind, and we tend to follow research based on those set ideas. And we have lost the art of doing science maybe 30 years back. And what we are doing now is not the correct science. There are a huge number of conflicts which are involved at this point in time as far as science is being performed across the world. But beyond that, I think if you are looking at the challenges, climate could be one of the challenges. Climate change could be one of the challenges. Then resource restrictions, whether it is because of post-COVID or otherwise, could be another challenges. And then COVID itself, post-COVID, long COVID could be another challenge which is going to impact us in future time to come. So plus the fact that we may enter into a situation where resource restrictions will lead to conflicts and wars. So probably wars, climate change, resource restrictions, long COVID impact, and these are probably some of the challenges that are going to challenge us in next 10, 20 years from now onwards. And the answers to them is probably in trying to find out the correct questions to be asked. What should be the question that we should start asking from ourselves now, and then trying to find answers to those questions, not the other way around. We have the answers and then search for the questions.
Sure, thank you so much for this answer. Looking about the perspective and more into the outlook of your research, where do you want to take it from here?
I think as far as my personal aspects or what I would say, venture into research is concerned, what I have realized is that my research should go more or less into an implementation mode. By that, what I mean is that I may have been able to find out the cause of the disease, or how exactly disease is spreading, or what is causing what is causing less occurrence of disease in some populations, or what are the preventive measures in some populations. My next level or my next venture should be in creating certain models in selected populations or smaller populations, and then implementing those models. Some of which I am trying to do in next 2-3 years, wherein I am integrating education, diet and nutrition, education, diet and nutrition, the system itself, the politics of the place itself, into one common framework, and then through that framework try to change what could be the health outcomes in a particular place, and maybe use these models which I am developing in one area, maybe use these models across larger populations later on. The implementation research is my field of area now.
Sure, thank you so much for this information. It can be that our current audience, those who are viewing, those who are listening to us, they consist of several groups of people. It can be those who are looking to join your research, and they search for the supervisor, they search for the mentor. These are those who are young scientists. It can be that these are patients who are looking for some advancement of different therapies or advancement of the research. They search for information. Or this can be investors who are looking also for interesting ideas and the ways how they can be implemented with already validated scientific background. What message would you have to these three groups of people? Those who are looking to join your research or collaborate with you, those who are patients, and those who are investors?
For the researchers, for a young researcher, I would tell him, start questioning things. He should have a question in his mind. He should not be branded by, or he should not be dictated by methodologies. Look, best of the research has come from questioning. It has not come from methodology. So the first and the foremost thing for every researcher should to start questioning and follow that question. So that is for the researcher part. For the investors, I would say, for all investors, I would say, please, before investing, think of conflicts. Because what I see around the world at this point in time is that research is led by conflicts. And there are n number of interests which are there with the individuals or the people who invest with regard to research, and that dictates the outcome of the research. So conflict-free research is something which all of us should be looking at. And the outcomes of research should be conflict-free. So investors should look at people who don't have conflict in their research, or are not going to come out with a research finding which has a conflict or a direct bearing on the investors itself. So invest in pure research, pure science, without conflict. And as far as patients are concerned, I would say all the patients should look up to the hospitals or the doctors or the healthcare professionals in a way wherein they are listening to an information and not judging them, and processing that information in a fair manner, and then using that information to their advantage. and not just listening to certain individuals at all.
Thank you so much for this. Besides that, what we already spoken about, is there anything you would like to add that our listeners should know about?
I think one more thing that we can add to, or what the listeners can know, is that we are at a situation in this world at this point in time. We are in a situation wherein we have sort of melted into a global part of civilizations, cultures, societies, scientific temperaments, and this probably is an opportunity for all of us. So maybe we were never so united as far as health was concerned, but this COVID pandemic has been a masterclass in bringing us together. So maybe this opportunity should be utilized, and all of us should come together and develop health in a way which is useful for all of us across the world, and not to certain populations only. So developing science, developing health in a manner which is applicable and accessible to everybody across the world is the key that needs to be taken up from now post-pandemic, because as I said, it has leveled all of us.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Raina, for being with us today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.